The Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return. My name is Joni Siegel, and I'm the host for this podcast. My husband, Steve Siegel, is the producer of the podcast. If you have a story you'd like to tell on our podcast, please reach out, theaddictionpodcast@yahoo.com, and we will get back to you. Today's episode is episode number 281. Just a reminder to please subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to podcasts and give us a 5-star rating so that when people who are suffering from addiction or have loved ones who are suffering from addiction, when they search Google, our podcast will come up. Because as you know, we are all about hope and offering help. Also, please check out our YouTube channel, subscribe, give us a thumbs up on our videos, and ring the bell so that when we put up a new video, you'll be notified. Today we have an interview with a gentleman named Christopher Dale. Christopher Dale is an experienced public relations professional, writer, and recovering addict. In addition to being a regular contributor to Addiction Recovery eBulletin, he has been published in a broad array of prominent outlets, including The Daily Beast, Salon, Parents.com, Dogster, New York Daily News, and Tribune Syndicate. He writes on a wide range of topics, including addiction, mental health, politics, parenting, travel, and rescue dog advocacy. Today, however, we're just going to talk about addiction. So let's talk to Christopher Dale. Christopher Dale, and I'm sorry, if you said the name of your lovely wife, I missed it. What's your name?
My name is Patty.
Patty. So Christopher and Patty Dale, thank you for being willing to be on the podcast today and sharing your story, because I know it's not only your story, Christopher, it's also yours as well, Patty, and I think it's important to hear about it.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
So Christopher, tell us where you grew up, what your childhood was like, your background. Tell us about you.
Sure. I grew up in a little town called Kearney, New Jersey, which is about 10 miles from where we live now in Little Falls, New Jersey. Childhood was a little rough. My mother passed away when I was very young. I was 3.
Oh.
She was 7 months pregnant with what would have been my younger sister. She died at age 24. My father, great guy, still alive, still in our lives, was the adult child of 2 alcoholics. And so asking him to raise a 3-year-old alone from age 30 in all that, after being raised in chaos himself, was probably a little too much to ask of anybody. And so childhood was kind of lonely, and I was kind of just, I think a lot of alcoholics would identify with being lonely in a room full of people. And I was that kind of kid, right? I was kind of geeky and gawky and awkward, and I had some book smarts, so I got straight A's, so no one kind of threw up any red flags, but I grew up pretty lonely, not a lot of friends. That changed a little bit in high school, kind of started coming out of my shell, meeting some new people. But yeah, childhood was rough. It wasn't fun.
Understood. A 3-year-old definitely needs his mother.
Yeah.
Especially a little boy. I think little girls too, but especially little boys. There's a lot to be said for daddy's little girl and a mama's boy. They're definitely there. So when did you get introduced to drugs or alcohol?
So, I think I went to college. I went to New York University. I think I would have been able to shake some of this stuff off and lead a relatively normal life. Patty and I met when we were sophomores. She walked into a party down at Rutgers in New Jersey. I was visiting a high school friend, and she recognized me we used to take piano lessons together, and we were like 5.
Oh my.
So she walks into the room and says, "Chris," and I'm like, "Who are you?" I didn't.
I'm surprised you admit that, Chris, but okay.
That was that. And, after someone who wasn't good at finding himself, I kind of stumbled into journalism major at NYU. It's a journalism school. I was in New York City. I was young and in love. I think things would have come out kind of okay. My story takes a kind of a weird turn. When I was just out of college, I started losing my eyesight.
Oh.
And the doctors couldn't figure out why. So I'm kind of young and new into the workforce. This is 2001. We graduated in 2001. I was in the coming up in the PATH station in the North Tower when the first plane hit.
Oh my gosh.
So a few years into the workforce, into kind of early adulthood, I started my vision. They noticed my vision wasn't correcting to 20/20. They did some tests. They thought it could have been a tumor. They realized it was something with my optic nerve and not my kind of the cable and not the lens, if that makes any sense. And over the course of 18 to 24 months, they just ran a battery of tests to try to figure out why. Never really got a definitive answer. Over that period of time, my vision diminished to 2060 and 2070-ish, and that's kind of where it stopped getting worse.
Wow.
And maybe somebody who wasn't raised in chaos, maybe someone who had a little bit better nature and nurture behind them to prop them up a little bit, would have been okay and been able to reintegrate, but that really wasn't my journey. It wasn't where I went with it. I had a deep depressive spiral, near suicide attempt. Somewhere in all of this, we're still together. We get married.
Oh.
But just after we kind of moved in, and I tried to. Now I'm really an adult, right? I'm a married man in my mid to late 20s in Brooklyn, and it just didn't work. I started drinking heavily. I couldn't sleep. I started drinking to get to sleep. I started drinking to feel normal and less awkward in social situations. And when you introduce someone with that level of depression and anxiety to cocaine, the result is pretty predictable. And it was a pretty instant addiction. Who
introduced you to cocaine?
I don't really remember. I'm pretty sure I just did it one day it was around one day at a party. I did a few lines, I did a few more, and I kind of never felt that level of bliss, ever. And that's a sick thing to say for someone who had already experienced, having a nice job, living in a nice place, married to a beautiful woman. It's a sick thing to say, but it's true.
I understand. So how long did you do cocaine? How long were you addicted to cocaine?
Most people in Alcoholics Anonymous, I go to AA and not NA because there's just more meetings that way. There's the proliferation of the program. They're actually shocked. They're not shocked, but they would have, they tell you that's a pretty short run. But I was addicted to cocaine pretty hard for about 3 years.
So I don't believe that there's like a short run versus a long run. Let me just say, addiction is addiction. Whether you're addicted for a year or 10 years or 40 years, it's not like you get more addicted, I don't think, the longer you go.
Yeah, so, it was violent. It was a violent, and I don't mean that we got violent with each other. I mean, it was a violent addiction. I couldn't go more than a few days at its peak. And, when you're maxing out credit cards, emptying bank accounts, stealing from our joint account, and, emptying a 401k after you get fired for being a cocaine addict, it's, the bottom was pretty steep, and I skidded along it for a while. So, I was unemployed and unemployable at the worst of it. This is 2010, early 2011.
And obviously, Patty, you were aware of what was going on, right?
Yes, I was. And it was not a fun journey for either of us.
No, I get it. Did you urge him to get help or stop or?
Well, absolutely. And I think there was the last moment where we forced him into rehab. But up to that point, there's not a well-defined time when it's partying and having fun, and then all of a sudden it transitions into addiction. And so this was a point in our lives when we were, young and just going out and having fun, spending time with our friends.
Childless.
Yeah, we didn't have a lot of responsibilities. Things were easy. And so it did not necessarily raise flags until, of course, it did.
Right. So then.
No return now to.
Yeah, I was going to say, are we getting close there? It sounds like it.
It crosses over to that point where a cucumber can't be, a pickle can't become a cucumber anymore, And I think I probably I probably fooled myself for as long as I could and then fooled her for even longer, right?
Yeah.
I think that's kind of the natural progression of this thing.
Understood. So at what point did you decide, was there an intervention, Patty? Is that what you guys did?
I call it that. Yeah. So I have a friend who, God bless his soul, I'm about to be the best man at his wedding in a month. He's not an alcoholic. He had one too many drinks in Vermont, in a small town with a strict cop. He got a DUI up there, right? So he has to go up to court, and he can't drive in the state leading up to this. So he can't drive in Vermont. So he needs someone in the middle of January to drive him from the middle of New York City to the middle of nowhere, New England. And who's available but, Captain Unemployment over here. The night before this was supposed to happen, I basically did cocaine all night. And by the end of, there was no way I could even begin to fake to get in the car and then drive 300 feet, let alone 300 miles. Okay. So that was that. And it was the last time, we knew that inpatient rehab was next, and I'll let Patty speak for herself, but I think she wouldn't have dreamt of leaving me had we not gotten to at least try inpatient rehab. And this is January of 2011. This is January of 2011. Yeah.
Okay.
It was late at night. We drove to your aunt and uncle's house.
Yeah.
We said, this is a problem. We need to do something.
Right. That's when she called in the cavalry, right? In term, getting back to your word intervention, we had an intervention in the names of my Aunt Linda and my late Uncle Steve. God bless their souls. And we ended up as, even after, when I didn't get immediately sober after rehab, we ended up moving in with them. And if any addicts out there who are married and trying to act as if in the real world like they're yuppies or something, and one of them's trying to get desperately clean, if you have an Aunt Linda and Uncle Steve, move in with them, okay? Because I think Patty needed 2 more sets of eyes that knew what was going on and that could be accountable. It took a little bit of pressure off of her. This is a woman that by age 30 was earning 6 figures and going into Manhattan every day and worried about her friggin' deadbeat of a husband at home blowing lines all day. That was too much stress for anybody over a protracted period of time. And when I didn't get instantly sober, the circle needed to expand.
You are listening to the Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return. For more information on the podcast, or to reach out if you have a story you would like to share with us, go to our Facebook page by the same name, or you can email us at theaddictionpodcast@yahoo.com, or go to our website, theaddictionpodcast.com, or call us at 727-314-7080. And please remember to subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen to podcasts and give us a 5-star review. Sometimes the hardest thing about getting someone into recovery is getting them to agree to treatment. Bobby Newman, a certified drug counselor with 30 years experience and an over 85% success rate as an interventionist, has created a series of 12 videos that you can use right now to learn every step to get your loved one to agree to treatment. Call 1-833-918-0008 today and say the word podcast to get a 10% discount. Or go to newmaninterventions.com and type in the word podcast for a 10% discount. This service comes with a free 1-hour consultation with Bobby. Right. So you went to treatment. You went to inpatient treatment.
I did. Yeah,
okay.
28
We
days.
tried outpatient too.
Yeah, that didn't work. I flunked out of that quickly.
Yeah, he lied his way out of that.
Okay.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. So I would say what inpatient treatment did, it didn't save my ass, but it saved my soul. Or maybe it didn't save my soul, but it saved my ass. So it was chronic before then. It was every few days. Now it was every few weeks. I was stringing together a couple of weeks here. There's a big difference, and it doesn't sound like much, but in that space, I was able to, start looking at her as less of a warden and more of a wife for the first time in several years. Get a job. I got another job that I still have today. And get a job where I can be open. I just told my boss about the book earlier this week, and not only was he not angry about it, he was thrilled. But so there's this period from February when I get out of rehab to finally October 10th, when was Columbus Day. I had off. I don't know who gives off for Columbus Day anymore. We've since stopped doing that. And she did not. I got drunk during the day. This is us. We're living in New Jersey now with Aunt Linda and Uncle Steve. And I didn't have a connect in New Jersey yet. So I'm fighting the urge to go into the city, getting more and more drunk. And by the time I finally gave into what I needed to do, I was barreling towards the largest city in America at 60 miles an hour, blind drunk. I sideswiped a cab in the Holland Tunnel, which is one of the two major tunnels connecting New Jersey and New York.
Right.
Kept going. News, spoiler alert to your audience and anyone who is unfamiliar with New York City, you can't really do what Jason Bourne did in the city.
The cops are waiting at the end.
The cops are pretty much right there. So, it was handcuffs and a night in the drunk tank. Patty and Uncle Steve.
You didn't come home.
I didn't come home.
That was it.
So my phone call later that night, after being read my rights, after sleeping it off in the jail cell for a few hours, was to Patty, who,
So I had to rouse Uncle Steve and
go and get the car.
Go into the city and kind of figure this all out.
Uh-huh.
So this was October 2021?
Yeah.
Yes.
No, October 2011.
Thank you. I was going to say, I didn't think it was that recent. Okay, October 2011. Okay.
All of this happened in a very short time span.
It did.
For which I suppose we're fortunate.
I think we're still married because it happened in that time span. At what point does a 31-year-old, 32-year-old woman want to salvage the rest of her youth at some point? Understandably, and that was it. That was the last drink I ever had was a warm 24-ounce can of Coors Light in the holster of my car. And that was that. And when I had my court appearance, she was waiting for me, and she was either going to leave at that point or she wasn't, and God help us, God save us, the next day, instead of getting up and moving back to Brooklyn, she got up and went to work. And so did I. And it was like final straw plus one.
Understood. And well done, Patty, because, I guess some people would say, oh, you should have just, cut your losses and gotten on with things. But it sounds to me like you guys have a strong enough marriage that there was enough there for you to salvage and enough good in Christopher that you wanted to continue with that. And I think that's huge. And well done on your sobriety, Christopher, because I know that that's not always easy.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Hey, she's more of a hero for, kind of transitioning into, recovery. There's this, and the reason I don't want to plug the book too long, but the reason I wrote Better Halves, the reason I wrote the book is because now what? I think there are statistics that show, obviously, addiction and alcoholism. You look at divorce numbers and nobody's shocked, right? But then when you see similar numbers, they're not even that much lower in early recovery. You're left thinking, well, why? Isn't the worst of this over? And that's what we thought, you think the worst, and the worst of it was over. That's part of the thing that clouds the judgment. But that doesn't mean the rest is going to be easy by any stretch of the imagination.
No, because you know that you're going to be sober that day. But she's not inside your head.
Right.
And she's got that doubt,
right.
Every day. Is today going to be the day that he's going to drink or he's going to use? And you're not, but
right.
She doesn't.
We live in this great, progressively open society. It's great. And addiction is less and less stigmatized. And a newly sober addict who's really committed has group-centric recovery, therapy, understanding, support, and their spouses and partners don't, at least not to the extent that I think they should.
It's definitely not readily available and doesn't serve the same purpose.
And even where it is available, you're left in a situation where you don't know what you don't know. Patty didn't know how much my addiction had damaged her. Patty didn't know that she was literally a worse person because of me. And Patty didn't know that she was supposed to be doing anything about any of this. She thought, let's give Chris some space to get his stuff together. And hopefully we'll be able to kind of reconnect. In our experience, it doesn't work that way. We both had to become healed, improved 2.0 versions of ourselves and almost get remarried in the process.
Understood. It's a new relationship, so to speak.
Definitely.
So you asked to tell me a little about the book. So the book is going to be published on November 4th. It's available from a cyber perspective, pretty much in the major, the Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target. And it's available in paperback or e-reader version. And the reason behind the book was that we're so grateful that we kind of stumbled into the right path after making a lot of wrong turns and false starts and just kind of not knowing for lack of knowledge. I'm hoping that just like when I go to AA and my sponsor gives me direction based on mistakes that he made in the past so that I don't have to make them. Maybe there's some folks out there that can read a book like this that's kind of part memoir and part suggestive, and not make the same pit and not stumble into the same pitfalls that we did. And that does,
Well, stumble into the pitfalls, but also make your way out the other side. And that was the next thing I was going to ask you from each of you. If you could give one piece of advice to a couple in which one is struggling with addiction, what advice would you give, Christopher? And Patty, what advice would you give?
Want me to go first? You want to go first?
I'll go first. I think that, I would say that in all of this, there's certainly no aha moment and no one size fits all approach. A lot of it is trial and error. And it really is about, it's not just about digging deep and looking into yourself. It's what do you want to accomplish together? What's possible? What can we do? And kind of make those small goals, those small steps with your partner.
And Christopher?
Directly to fellow recovering addicts, don't leave your partners or spouses out of your early sobriety. We all know that this isn't cancer. This isn't diabetes. This is a takes one to help one affliction. And because of that, I think it's tempting to just go run off into your group-centric recovery, acknowledge and basically take for granted that the spouse who stuck by you in addiction is going to stick by you in early recovery. And the dangerous part of that thinking is that you're right. She's going to stick by you, but in order for the marriage to kind of begin to heal, your partner needs to be brought along for the ride at least a little bit. Open meetings, take her out with your sponsor to a diner once in a while. Just let him or her in a little bit so that they have more of a understanding and a reassurance that this time is actually different. That the same platitudes you've been giving them for a while now, something has magically clicked, because it is magic, and it's hard to describe magic to someone who's never experienced addiction, not personally anyway, right?
Yep. I think that's huge. I think that's a great piece of advice. I want to thank you both for being willing to talk to us today and sharing a situation that's pretty personal to both of you. And I really appreciate it, because I think it's going to resonate with some people who are listening, and maybe we'll save some marriages as well as get people clean and sober. And if we can do that, I'm a happy camper.
Thank you. We really appreciate you having us on.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
I think that this interview is very valuable. As I said to Christopher and Patty after the podcast, I said, mostly we have talked to spouses who lost their husband to addiction or their wife and or just a loved one. And I think the beauty of this is that you have a husband who got clean and sober and a wife who was able to see what was there in the marriage and continue with the marriage. And now they're happy and they're moving through sobriety and recovery together. And I think that's huge. So thank you very much for listening. This podcast will be is airing in August, and his book comes out November 4th. If you are on our email list, you'll get an email reminding you that the book is out. So everybody have a great week. We'll be back again with another interview.
You have been listening to the Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return. For more information, reach out to us on Facebook or go to www.theaddictionpodcast.com. Our email is theaddictionpodcast@yahoo.com.